Ready to go.
All right. All right, let's go do this. Hello and welcome to Season 2, Episode 36 of the Hockey Nuts Podcast. My name's Wayne. I'm here with Steve. How's it going this week, Steve?
It's going great, Wayne. Good to be with you tonight and talk hockey again. We have an off night in the NHL, but no games tonight. But great night to talk about how things are progressing in the playoffs.
Yeah, a couple of off nights, actually.
Yep.
No games last night either. No
That's
games
right.
tonight. I don't know what to do with myself. Yeah, basically all the there's 4 series going on right now, and 3 of them wrapped up, all one right after another. 2 wrapped up there a couple of nights ago, and then another one wrapped up the night after that. And then we've had 2 days off here because basically everybody's waiting for yet another Game 7. So we're basically sitting in this one where we were 2 weeks ago, where we were sitting there with 1 game left in the entire round, and we're recording a podcast. We had the same thing happen in round 1 where we recorded a podcast, and there was 1 game left, and that was the Bruins versus Maple Leafs in Game 7. And, of course, we've moved past that, and now we're sitting here in round 2 where there's 1 game left in all of round 2, and that is yet another Game 7 between the Preds and the Jets. So, yeah, it's going to be a fun game. But before we get to talking to that, we want to go ahead and take things series by series like we have. So, and we're down to just 4 series to talk about.
That's right.
And, of course, we're going to start out east with the Lightning and the Bruins.
Yes.
And this series was very disappointing for me, of course, being a Bruins fan. But can't say I wasn't surprised at the outcome of the series. I was just a little surprised at how quickly it ended. I thought Boston would make the series last longer than it did, especially after Game 1, where Boston came out and just dominated Tampa Bay in Game 1, won that game 6-2. But after that, it was all Tampa Bay. Not in a dominating way, because all 4 games that Boston lost were close, and some of them went right down to the wire. But Tampa Bay was clearly the better team. Barring all the, a lot of Bruins fans are upset about the officiating. Game 2, there was a headman hook on Marchand right on the hands that went uncalled. It was a breakaway. Could have been a game changer there. And then in game, I can't remember now, there was Game 4, McAvoy got hooked by a Tampa Bay player. He went down, coughed up the puck right to Stamkos. That allowed Stamkos to tie the game late in the third, and then, of course, Tampa Bay ended up winning that game in overtime. All that stuff aside, we can complain all we want about officiating, but bottom line is, Boston allowed themselves to be in a situation where a bad call here or there would end up costing them a game, or in this case, 2 games.
Right.
If they'd have played better and, would have played better than they had all season, really, they wouldn't have been in those situations. So,
Right.
Bottom line is, you still got to play through that stuff. Bad calls are going to happen. It was unfortunate in this case where it seemed to me that more bad calls went against Boston than against Tampa, but it is what it is. I know we hate that saying, but bottom line is Tampa Bay came out and won 4 straight after losing the first game. Game 2 was 4-2 Tampa Bay. Game 3 was 4-1 Tampa Bay. Game 4 was 4-3 Tampa Bay in overtime. And then Game 5 was 3-1 Tampa Bay. So, Boston never won a game after that first one. And it's not all the referee's fault. There was plenty of blame to go around. And as we're finding out, too, and we always do, when series end, you start seeing all the injuries, and we were talking briefly about it before we hit the record button there. Boston had a number of injuries, and we'll get to those later in the show when we get to talking about injuries, but probably 8 to 10 players were playing with injuries. on the Boston side of things, which can explain some of the weaker than expected performances by certain individuals.
Right.
We'll put it that way.
I thought I can't comment on Game 3. I didn't see it. But my wife and I watched both Game 4 and Game 5, okay? Game 4 really could have been won by Boston. And Boston could have, I'm coming just this short of saying should have won that game. That was a very close game, wouldn't you say, Wayne?
Oh, yeah. That
one hurt.
Yep.
Because I really think Boston had that game. A missed shot here and there, or whatever they need. They had their chances in overtime.
They did. Yep.
They really did. They couldn't convert.
And if they would have scored in overtime, you're looking at a 2-2 going into Game 5 rather than a 3-1.
Game 5.
And that makes it.
The thing that we talk about with Pittsburgh. And first of all, let me start this by saying I saw major improvements in the Bruins this year. They should be happy.
Yep.
They had a great year, not just a good year, a great year with major improvements in their play. They went from being, I think, a lower level playoff team to now contesting to get to the finals next year. I would put them as a team that really could make the finals of the conference.
Well, most of the so-called experts, all the professional hockey writers and reporters out there, most of them had the Bruins missing the playoffs this year. And I think in our initial season preview, if we go back to season 2 episode 5, 6, 7 when we started doing our season previews, I personally had the Bruins on the outside looking in.
Yeah.
If I remember right.
I had them as a playoff team, as I recall, but I didn't have them making the conference finals. I don't even know if I had them winning a round in the playoffs. But I know this: they played very well. They surprised me. They played better than I thought they would. But they had a great season. Okay, those are the types of games when you lose in Game 4 that they hurt. You're in a series against the best team in the East the whole year. They're the best team in the East. And when you lose a game like that, especially on your home ice, it is demoralizing.
Yep.
But they got on a plane. They went down to Tampa on the 6th. And I watched that game. And they played very, very hard and very, very well. There was no, hangover, so to speak, or, woe is me type of attitude. They were right in that game, and I felt like the loss. Vasilevsky made some incredible saves in the third period.
He certainly did. Yep.
He played unbelievable. Some of those saves, I told you, I thought they were miracles that he came up with the puck, saving it.
Yep.
I'm really surprised still on a couple of those plays because the Bruins really had some great chances. But if you look at that third period as a whole, Tampa Bay was able to control the neutral zone. And when they had the puck in the Bruins' end, they were able to sustain keeping it there. Boston, it wasn't one shot, the rebound comes out, Boston gets it, goes down the ice. A lot of times they were able to keep the puck going, keep shooting it in on Boston, and Boston couldn't get the puck. They didn't score till the end on that on the empty net goal by Stralman. But they still had that presence in Boston's zone, which, Boston just couldn't break out of that.
Yep. And
you can say what you want. I thought Tuukka Rask played an incredible game too, especially in the third period. He played very well. But hats off to Boston. They had a great season. I think they should have won a couple more games against Tampa Bay than they did. I especially think they should have won Game 4. But regardless, they didn't this time. They'll have another chance next year, I think, and they can learn from what happened.
Yep.
And really take it to Tampa Bay next year, because I think you're looking at a team that's going to come back and go back into this same position again next year. The Lightning have it all.
Yeah, and these rivalries certainly are not going to be done. I think, yeah, there's, like you said, there's some future to the Lightning versus Bruins, just like there's a future to Bruins versus Toronto. I think those three teams are going to, for the next several years, have set themselves up to basically battle it out every single year. It'll be these three teams in the Atlantic Division that are going to be right there in the thick of things all season long. So,
Agreed.
So yeah, it's, this is just chapter. Well, they have played each other before in the playoffs, but chapter one in terms of how with the core group of these particular teams are made up anyway.
Right.
So, so yeah, all in all, disappointed the Bruins lost, but yet, like you said, Bruins did have a better than expected season. So, there's that consolation. And I'm excited for how this team is going to be in the future.
Look at me, man. I'm sitting here looking at
yeah.
I don't going to make the playoffs. We're in a totally different situation. Yep. You're in a situation where you got a team that's looking forward to the year. They've got great talent on that team, and they're flourishing. There's a lot to be thankful for if I'm a Bruins fan. And I'm not, but if I was.
For sure. So, all right, let's move on to the next series. And I am still in shock over the result of this series.
Yeah.
The whole series I was telling, people at work, there's a couple guys at work that are Penguins fans. There's another guy at work that's a Capitals fan. And, I kept telling all these guys, look, I said, no matter what happens in all these games, I kept saying right from day one, Pittsburgh is going to win this series. They're going to find a way like they always do against Washington. And we talked about the head-to-head record in the playoffs with these two teams, how when these two meet in the playoffs, it is dominated by the Penguins in years past. It's 10 of 11 or 9 of 10 series, something like that. I mean, it's ridiculous how often Pittsburgh beats Washington when they play each other in the playoffs. And
let me throw it out to you. The last time they won a playoff series was 1994 when the Rangers won the Stanley Cup against the Penguins. Yep. The last time Washington won a playoff series against the Penguins, and the only time they won against the Penguins, was in 1994 when the Rangers won the Stanley Cup.
Yep.
That's how long, 24 years.
And it's been since 1998 that they've been to the third round at all. And that year, they didn't have to play the Penguins to get to the third round.
Right.
They actually ended up going to the Cup final that year, but the last time they got out of the second round was 1998. But lo and behold, Washington finally pulled it off. They slayed the dragon, and we will have a new Stanley Cup champion for the first time in 3 years.
Yep. So, and I tell you, Wayne, they didn't just slay the dragon. They took it to Pittsburgh. They deserved to win that series. And I saw an Alexander Ovechkin not thinking about the World Championships, not focusing on going to be with his brethren in Russia, but Alexander Ovechkin very much in tune with the fact that Father Time is ticking, and if you want to win a Stanley Cup, you're not going to have a lot more chances whether you go through Pittsburgh, Tampa Bay, or whoever you got to play. Yep. It's time to perform, and that's the guy that really stepped it up in that series. He played. If it ended today, he's the Conn Smythe winner. He really is. Yeah, he played amazing hockey.
He had a tremendous series, and of course, just to recap it all, Washington ends up winning the series in 6. Game 1 went to Pittsburgh 3-2. Game 2, Washington tied it with a 4-1 win. Then the series switched to Pittsburgh. And Game 3 went to Washington 4-3. Yep. Game 4 went to Pittsburgh 3-1. So coming back to Washington, the series was tied 2-2. And then Washington won at home 6-3 in a rather dominating fashion. Pittsburgh never really was in the game in that one. Yep. And then Game 6, went back to Pittsburgh, and Washington won that game 2-1 in overtime to seal the series. And even in that game, I was completely convinced that Pittsburgh was going to find a way to win that game because, Washington had they had the 1-0 lead, and then Pittsburgh came back and tied it, and then they took the 2-1 they came back and tied it, and then it went to overtime.
Yep.
And when it went to overtime, I said, this is where Pittsburgh is going to rip the heart out of all Washington fans everywhere by winning this game in overtime. Then they're going to go into Washington and take Game 7. Yeah. I was even up until right before Washington scored, I was still convinced that Pittsburgh was going to find a way to win this game, bring it to Game 7, and then win Game 7 and win the series like they always do.
Yep.
But then Washington won the game with the was it Kuznetsov who had the game winner?
Kuznetsov scored on the game winner.
That's right.
The pass from Alexander Ovechkin.
And you know what?
Steal.
And you know what? Like you were saying how Ovechkin really stepped up. I think he stepped up big on that play in that he saw that Kuznetsov was a couple steps behind the Pittsburgh defense. And let's say 5-6 years ago, Ovechkin would have carried the puck out of his zone and try to make that a 2-on-1. He would have gone in and try to basically do it all himself. But in this case, he saw the better option. He saw that it was Kuznetsov. He got it up to him, and Kuznetsov with the breakaway goal, showing that Ovechkin has finally realized that he doesn't have to do it all alone. That he does have plenty of talent around him, and then he needs to learn how to use it. So, ultimately, when that puck went in, when I'm watching the game, I'm like, wait, did Washington just score?
Yeah.
I'm oh my God, they did it.
It was the Pittsburgh fans were in a state of shock.
Yep.
They just very few cheers.
I was stunned, and I was rooting against Pittsburgh in this one.
In the space, if you look at that replay, in the space of about 10 seconds, you saw the two-time defending Stanley Cup champions go down on their home ice, and there was nothing that could be done. So it truly was a sudden death.
Yep.
And, they got a great team, Pittsburgh, but the scuttlebutt or the talk about them is they just don't have the depth anymore.
Right.
And I agree with that. That's been the sentiment that you hear from the analysts and from the guys that kick this stuff back and forth each week in hockey. That Pittsburgh has lost the depth that they had for the last several years, really.
Yep.
And it showed.
And that's reality in a salary cap world. That's just the way it is now. You can't keep a good team together for that long because eventually you got to start paying these role players,
right?
What they're worth. And under the current salary cap situation, you just can't keep a team like that together. These lower tier players that have good seasons on Stanley Cup teams are going to end up costing you. And we're going to see the same thing happen with a team like Vegas, where they're top to bottom, real deep, right from the first line right straight through the fourth line. You got a whole bunch of guys on that team that are all having career years at the same time. Yeah. And when the contracts are up, that's going to be a problem. They're not going to be able to keep all those guys.
That's right. That's right.
So that's just reality. So Pittsburgh is now out. So we will now have a new Stanley Cup champion, and representing the East will be either the Tampa Bay Lightning or the Washington Capitals. And which team that will be, we'll find out because they're playing each other in round 3.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a fun series.
That is. Especially, you look at how the Capitals have played this playoff season, and my opinion is that the Winnipeg Jets have just far exceeded you have Vegas, of course. We've been talking about their miracle season for a long time. But if you want to talk about teams that really have played beyond expectation since the playoffs started. Winnipeg definitely has had a great playoff season, but the Washington Capitals have played tremendous, and so Tampa Bay is not. I don't, I mean, stranger things have happened, but I don't think that's going to be a 4-0 win for Tampa Bay. They're not going to come in and sweep Washington.
Nope.
Alexander Ovechkin is going to have something to say about it. So
no, you're going to have you've got the obvious Ovechkin versus you could even say Kucherov is the best player on the Lightning right now with Stamkos, who to me I still say is still hurt because he's not playing. He's not as effective as we would expect him to be. So you've got the all Russian matchup there with Kuznetsov and Ovechkin. But I think ultimately what's going to decide this series is goaltending. Which goalie is going to perform best?
Right.
Is going to win the series. Will it be Holtby? Will he continue to play in as well as he has? Or will he go back to being the Holtby that we saw towards the end of the regular season where he seemed to struggle quite a bit?
Yeah.
Same thing with Vasilevsky. Towards the end of the regular season, he struggled a little bit, probably due to fatigue because he played almost 70 games.
Right.
And since then, he's been pretty darn good in the playoffs. So
right.
I think here the goaltending matchup is probably, above all, is going to probably be the one spot in both lineups that will determine who will win this series.
I agree with you 100% on that. I think they couldn't have said it any better.
Yep. So yeah, that'll be an interesting series to watch. But before we get to that, obviously those two teams are sitting around waiting. We've got to go out west and talk about the other series that are going on. Right. And this next one is the one series that we are all waiting on getting finished up because that one is still going, and that is the Nashville Predators versus Winnipeg Jets. We are heading to a Game 7 in this series.
Yep, that is... And here I am sitting here thinking, the game is in Winnipeg. It's not.
No, it's in Nashville.
It's in Nashville, and so it's going to be a great game. It really is. Winnipeg was able to pull off the miracle and beat Nashville in Game 1, and that was quite a resounding victory. Nashville came back to win a game in Winnipeg as well. But I don't know. Winning 2 games in Nashville, not going to be easy.
Yeah, and I think you could make a case that between these two teams are probably, at this moment, the two most passionate fan bases in terms of in the arena, the excitement and the noise and just the loudness of the fans inside the building.
Right.
These two teams are head and shoulders above everybody else. Nashville fans, of course, are crazy with the chants and the cheers and all the stuff that they do. Winnipeg with the whiteout. I mean, it's disappointing in that one of these two teams has to be eliminated now because I think both deserve to continue. But unfortunately, one has to leave now, and we will find out tomorrow night who's going to leave now. And I certainly have a date with my couch that night to watch this game. Game's at 8 o'clock on Thursday night, and that game is in Nashville, so we'll be interested to see which country singer comes out and sings the national anthem for that one. And, I mean, and we talked about a little bit before the recording of the show is if Winnipeg is to beat Nashville in Nashville, they've got to jump on the board early and quiet that crowd.
Yeah.
If they do that, they've got a great shot at winning the game and the series.
Yeah.
If Nashville comes out and takes the lead early and that crowd gets going, then Winnipeg will have a huge mountain to climb.
Yep. Oh yeah.
In that one.
Yeah, it's going to be very, very tough for Winnipeg playing in Nashville. But they do have a powerful offense. A potent offense.
Yep,
they can score at any time.
They do.
And they have a better offense than Nashville.
Yep.
So it is going to be taking advantage of the opportunities that present itself to Winnipeg early on. If they can get a goal going first, score first, get out of the first period ahead 1-0 or 2-1, they stand a very good chance.
Yep.
And of course, Connor Hellebuck has to show up. So.
Yeah, and what'd you think about the Subban guarantee? Now he's guaranteed wins before. I think he did that last year, and it came back to bite him. It didn't come to fruition. I think he guaranteed a win. I think in Game 6 against the Penguins last year in the final, if I remember right, and Nashville ended up losing that game.
Yeah.
This time around, he guaranteed a Game 6 win for Nashville in that one, and Nashville ended up winning that game 4-0. So to force a Game 7.